morning, everybody. I welcome all of you to this very important hearing to consider the nomination of former Florida Attorney General Bondi. She's serving as the 87th Attorney General of the United States after her approval. Congratulations to your nomination, Ms. Bondi, and thank you for your willingness to serve. I thank Senator Durbin for his leadership as chairman of the committee over the last 4 years. Although he and I have differences of policies, I think the public could say we worked well together on many issues over the years. As he steps into his role as ranking member, I will work closely with Senator Durbin to serve the American people. I also would like to welcome three brand new members of the committee and a person that's repeating his service here after a stint off. I welcome to the committee Senator Britt, Senator Schmidt, Senator Crapel, and Senator Schiff. Welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to set out a couple ground rules. I want to handle this hearing using a similar structure to how Senator Durbin handled the nomination hearing of Attorney General Garland. I want everyone here to be able to watch the hearing without obstruction. If people stand up and block the view of those behind them or speak out of turn, it's not fair or considerate to others, so officers will immediately remove those individuals. Now, before I turn to my opening statement, let me explain how we're going to proceed today. I'll give my opening remarks, and then I'll invite Ranking Member Durbin to give his opening remarks. Then I'll call on Senator Scott and Schmidt to introduce this nominee. And following those introductions and Ms. Bondi's statement, we'll begin the first round of questioning. Each senator will have an initial 7-minute round for question. After the first round, we'll do a second 4-minute round of questioning. Members should do their very best to adhere to these time limits so that we can proceed efficiently with the hearing. We're here today to considering Bondi's nomination to serve as Attorney General of the United States. Ms. Bondi, for a second time, I thank you for your nomination, willingness to serve, but more importantly, serve the important role of Senate's advising consent process. You're nominated to one of the most important offices in our country. It took a lot of work on your part just to get here today. The more than 14,000 pages of records, hundreds of hours of media files, and more than 3,400 responsive entries you disclosed to this committee are a testament to your long career in public eye and your cooperation with this committee. I'd like to also thank your family for being here today. I know that many of them have traveled some distance to celebrate with you. I'd like to explain and expect that Ms. Bondi be treated fairly. During Attorney General Garland's confirmation hearing, Republicans treated him with respect. We asked tough but fair questions, and we ultimately voted him out of committee on a bipartisan basis. Although Attorney General Garland wasn't who we on this side of the aisle would have chosen to lead the Department of Justice, we recognize that President Biden won that election and that he was entitled to choose his attorney general. We were ultimately disappointed with some of the things that General Garland and his department did, but at the time of his nomination, we gave him the benefit of the doubt. As the recent terrorist attacks in New Orleans and around the world have shown, our national security must be a high priority. The American people deserve a secure homeland and borders, safe streets, orderly markets, civil rights, and a protected environment. So, delivering on these promises required the swift confirmation of an attorney general. This committee should give Ms. Bondi the same benefit of the doubt that this committee gave to Attorney General Garland. President Trump has selected a nominee whose qualifications speak for themselves. Ms. Bondi made history in 2010 as the first woman to be elected Florida Attorney General. She held that role for 8 years and was comfortably reelected by the people of Florida to a second term. 8 years of service as Attorney General of the third largest state in the nation is excellent preparation for the role of U.S. Attorney General. As Florida Attorney General, Ms. Bondi was a member of the Florida Cabinet, chief legal officer of the state, and led a large agency that tangibly impacted people's lives. And by all accounts, Ms. Bondi handled her responsibilities well. As the Florida Attorney General, Ms. Bondi achieved numerous successes. She engaged in key initiatives to fight human trafficking, counter the opioid epidemic, and protect consumers and protect the citizens of Florida from violence. She didn't shy away from hard work or complicated problems. She engaged in an aggressive campaign to eliminate pill mills, took a leading role in securing a $3.25 billion settlement following the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and eliminated the backlog of rape test kits that had accumulated in that state's laboratories. Ms. Bondi experience isn't limited to her service as Florida Attorney General. She also served as a prosecutor in Hillsborough County for 18 years and prosecuted terrible crimes. She sought tough penalties and justice for victims of violent criminals, domestic abusers, and sexual predators. She prosecuted drug traffickers and thus protected her community. She was also active outside of her professional role, serving in the Junior League of Tampa, on the board of Special Olympics Florida, and is well known for her animal rescue efforts. Her experience and performance as Attorney General, prosecutor, and community leader speaks volumes about her character and her dedication to the rule of law. She's received multiple letters in support of her nomination, including from the Fraternal Order of Police, the Republican State Attorneys General, more than 100 former senior DOJ officials, and a bipartisan group of former state attorneys general. In short, Ms. Bondi is highly qualified. And of course, as we all know, a change is desperately needed. When confirmed, Ms. Bondi will take the helm of at a very turbulent time for this country and for that department. The Justice Department's is infected with political decision-making, while its leaders refuse to acknowledge that reality. Crossfire Hurricane was a textbook example of government weaponization. The FBI's investigation was built on the fake Steele dossier, which was funded by the Democratic National Committee and Clinton campaign, who worked with foreign operatives. My investigative work exposed that the FBI actually knew the dossier was false information and was likely a part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Even with the knowledge of such dossier defects and political infections, the Justice Department sought FISA warrant renewals and took other actions. After directing my oversight staff to investigate Justice Department's mishandlings of the matter, the Justice Department retaliated in issuing a subpoena for my own staff's phone records. That's right, challenging my constitutional rights of doing my oversight duties. Well, what's next? Then a few Democratic colleagues pressured the FBI Foreign Influence Task Force to supposedly brief me and Senator Johnson related to our Biden family investigation. On August the 20th, Senator Johnson and I had that infamous briefing from the FBI. Later, this FBI's briefing contents were leaked to the media, even though the FBI promised confidentiality. That leak falsely labeled our oversight work as, you guessed it, Russian disinformation. To this day, over 4 years later, the intelligence community and the FBI refused to provide us the intelligence basis for that briefing. The title of this Wall Street Journal's article sums it up, quote, "The FBI's dubious briefing. Did the Bureau set 2 U.S. GOP senators up at the behest of Democrats?" Question mark, end of quote. So, I know, as other people on this committee and in and out of Congress know, what government weaponization is. And then we get to Special Counsel Jack Smith and his lawfare operation. It involved an unprecedented FBI raid on Trump's house, including agents that even searched the former First Lady's clothing drawers. Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden certainly did not receive the same treatment by government regarding their records. Indeed, as my oversight exposed, the FBI amazingly agreed to destroy laptop records and records associated with Clinton staff. This Orwellian conduct should have no quarter. On top of it all, the FBI Special Agent Thibault, the anti-Trump agent that violated the Hatch Act for political activities on the job, started one of Jack Smith's cases. But Jack Smith wasn't the only department official who tried to influence this past election. The Washington Post reported just last August about a previously undisclosed Mueller investigation into Trump that was closed for lack of evidence, and it being, quote unquote, fishing expedition. That news reporting was based on sealed court records, government records, and potentially classified information roughly 90 days before the last presidential election. The Justice Department leaked that information to the press to impact the election against President Trump. And they did it while stiff-arming congressional requests for information that would prove embarrassing to the Biden-Harris administration. So let us not forget some of the more and other flagrant abuses of power that we've seen from the DOJ and the FBI over the last 4 years. And I don't have the time to spend on these that I spent on 2 or 3 others, but just to list them. The Department of Justice used the might of the federal government to prosecute individuals peacefully praying outside of an abortion clinic. The FBI suggested that traditional Catholics could be domestic terrorism threats, claiming that these individuals adhere to, quote, anti-Semitic, anti-immigration, anti-LGBT, and white supremacy ideology, end of quote. The FBI opened dozens of investigations into parents who voiced their concerns at school board meetings regarding curriculum choices and COVID-19 mandates. The FBI applied undue pressure to social media platforms to censor so-called misinformation, downgrading or removing flagged social media posts and removing users. These are only a few particularly egregious examples of rot infesting the Department of Justice. The impact of this political infection in our once storied law enforcement institutions is catastrophic. By every metric, the Biden-Harris Justice Department conduct has failed to live up to our country's ideals. So, Ms. Bondi, should you be confirmed, the actions you take to change the department's course must be for accountability so that the conduct I just described never happens again. The only way to accomplish this is through transparency for the Congress and the American people. Now to my friend, Ranking Member Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. I appreciate your commitment to the Judiciary Committee's longstanding bipartisan practices for vetting presidential nominees. That was in doubt several weeks ago, but I spoke to Senator Grassley and he assured me that he's still personally committed, as I am, to maintaining these practices which we've established over the years. Our process is rigorous, and it shows how seriously members on both sides of the aisle take our constitutional responsibility of advice and consent. Ms. Bondi, thanks for coming to my office last week to discuss your nomination. The importance of the Attorney General to our justice system cannot be overstated. As our nation's chief law enforcement officer, the Attorney General oversees the Department of Justice, which is responsible for protecting the civil rights of Americans, economic freedom and opportunity, public safety, and of course, national security. In short, the Attorney General has real impact on America's everyday life. It is critical that any nominee for this position be committed first and foremost to the Constitution and the American people, not any president or political agenda. But President Trump claims he has, quote, an absolute right to do what he wants with the Justice Department. And that's how he conducted his first term. He interfered with the criminal cases of his friends and allies and successfully pressured DOJ to investigate his rivals. He even tried to use the Justice Department to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. The president-elect made it clear that he values one thing above all else, and he said it over and over again, loyalty. Speaking about Attorney General Sessions, Donald Trump said, quote, the only reason I gave him the job is because I felt loyalty. He was an original supporter. But when then Attorney General Sessions did the right thing and recused himself from the Mueller investigation, Trump said he should never have nominated him, and he fired him. Trump then nominated Bill Barr to succeed Sessions. Barr successfully auditioned for the job in an unsolicited memo to DOJ that sharply criticized the Mueller investigation. Once confirmed, Barr misrepresented and blocked the release of the report. intervened in multiple criminal cases of Trump's political allies, and spread falsehoods about election fraud. But in December of 2020, when Bill Barr finally announced there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud that would change the outcome of the election, Trump dismissed him, fired his second attorney general. This time around, President-elect Trump has vowed not just to use the Justice Department to advance his political interests, but also to seek, quote, retribution against, quote, the enemy within. He has repeatedly threatened to arrest, prosecute, jail, and otherwise punish those he considers his enemies. This includes reporters, prosecutors, judges, poll workers, military officials, and even his own former political appointees. Even before taking office, Trump has forced out his own FBI director that he appointed, Chris Wray, and he's trying to replace Wray with Kash Patel, whose main qualification to be FBI director seems to be his loyalty to Donald Trump. Patel has even compiled an enemies list of, quote, government gangsters to target that even includes former Trump appointees like Director Wray, Attorney General Barr, and Defense Secretary Esper. Trump's approach is a stark contrast with the bipartisan view born out of the post-Nixon era that the Justice Department should serve the interest of the American people, not any one president. For those who need a reminder, Richard Nixon ordered department officials to fire Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor investigating Watergate. Two of those officials, Elliot Richardson and William Ruckelshaus, resigned rather than carry out Richard Nixon's orders. When this committee considered the appointment of Loretta Lynch to be President Obama's Attorney General, a Republican member of the committee emphasized, and I quote, "What we need from our next Attorney General more than anything else is independence." That same member, who now still serves on the committee, said, and I quote, "The job is not to be the president's wingman. The job is to represent all Americans. The Attorney General must be willing to stand up to the president and say no when the office demands it." When Attorney General nominee Merrick Garland came before this committee, another one of my Republican colleagues still serving told Garland, and I quote, "My sole criterion for voting for your confirmation is your pledge to make sure that politics does not affect your job as Attorney General." So the view that the Justice Department must be insulated from political influence should not be weaponized against political rivals has historically been bipartisan, certainly on this committee. At this crucial moment in history, that view, not Mr. Trump's view, must prevail. Ms. Bondi, you have many years of experience in law enforcement, including nearly a decade of service as Attorney General in one of the largest states of the nation. But I need to know that you would tell the president no if you're asked to do something that is wrong, illegal, or unconstitutional. Ms. Bondi, you are one of 4 Trump personal lawyers that he has already selected for top positions in the Department of Justice. You joined Mr. Trump in working to overturn the 2020 election. You've repeatedly described investigations and prosecutions of Mr. Trump as witch hunts, and you have echoed his calls for investigating and prosecuting his political opponents. This flies in the face of evidence, like Mr. Trump's call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. We've all heard that audio recording. These are the kinds of anti-democratic efforts that in the past you have defended, and it's critical that we understand whether you remain supportive of Mr. Trump's actions. I also have questions whether you will focus on the needs of the American people rather than wealthy special interests. I'm concerned that you failed to identify your extensive lobbying for foreign governments and big corporations as potential conflicts of interest. There will be questions in this hearing on that issue. That's why I've asked the Justice Department and the National Archives for information on your lobbying of the Trump White House and your foreign lobbying disclosures. I'm particularly concerned about your work on behalf of the government of Qatar, which reportedly paid you $115,000 a month to launder their image on human trafficking, an issue of bipartisan concern on this committee. We need an Attorney General who will enforce our antitrust laws to prevent price fixing and monopolies that lead to higher prices for American consumers, not favor corporate giants that you've lobbied for in the past like Amazon and Uber. I also have questions about some of your actions as Florida Attorney General. I'm concerned that your office failed to investigate more than 24 complaints about the for-profit Trump University after Mr. Trump donated to your reelection campaign and held a fundraiser for you at Mar-a-Lago. In addition, you have a long track record on the issue of civil rights, reproductive rights, voting rights, and LGBTQ rights that needs to be discussed. In contrast, Ms. Bondi, Merrick Garland didn't campaign for President Biden, never served as his personal attorney, never lobbied on behalf of foreign governments and corporate giants. After years of relentless criticism on Attorney General Garland from many of my Republican colleagues, I hope they're prepared to hold you to the same standard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, it's now time for senators to introduce the nominee. The first one will be Senator Scott at the table, as you see, and Senator Schmidt is a member of this committee at his place on the dais. Senator Scott, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and committee members, it is an absolute honor to sit before you today to introduce my good friend, Pam Bondi, for her nomination hearing. I'd also like to recognize some important people appearing in support of her today, her husband, John, as well as her mother, father-in-law, sister, brother, sister-in-law, and nephews, friends, and family members of John. Many more would surely be here if space allowed. I can tell you wholeheartedly that President Trump couldn't have a better leader than Pam Bondi for Attorney General. She is undoubtedly qualified, brilliant, and committed to defending and protecting the laws of this nation, and has a track record to prove it. It is no secret that the DOJ is facing a public trust crisis after Democrats spent years weaponizing the justice system and the entire federal government. They become an agency that attacks the American people instead of defending and protecting them. That will change under Pam Bondi. Under her leadership, the DOJ will actually fairly enforce the laws, protect the rights of the American people, and keep our nation safe and crack down on violent crimes and dangerous drugs. And the American people will trust her to do so. I know that well because I worked alongside Pam Bondi for 8 years when I was governor of Florida, and she was Florida's elected Attorney General, working to improve the lives of Floridians to make Florida the best state in the nation to live, work, and raise a family. Pam was an incredible partner, working to keep Florida safe and uphold the laws of our state, ensuring crime is aggressively pursued by law enforcement and prosecutors. President Trump has made clear that one of his top priorities is to reverse the rising rates of crime, and specifically violent crime, that have plagued our communities over the past 4 years. Pam Bondi is uniquely equipped to advance this priority as U.S. Attorney General because she has a proven track record of success in achieving dramatic reductions in crime and violent crime during her time as Florida's Attorney General. From 2010, the year before she took office, to 2018, the last year she was in office, together, Florida experienced a remarkable 26% drop in overall crime, including a 19.6% drop in violent crime and a 27.4% drop in property crime. These aren't just numbers. These are tens of thousands of lives saved and communities improved and made safer and families and businesses protected. As Florida's Attorney General, Pam Bondi also spearheaded other life-saving initiatives like tackling the opioid epidemic and fighting human trafficking. Her achievements are too many for me to list in this short introduction. As U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi will restore law and order to the nation. She'll put Americans' interests first and make the nation a better and safer place. I urge every single member of this committee to support my friend Pam Bondi, and I look forward to voting for her confirmation soon on the Senate floor and help her get to work for the American people. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. It is an honor for me and a privilege to introduce Pam Bondi, President Trump's nominee to be the 87th Attorney General of the United States. I have known and worked closely with Pam for years, and I'm glad to call her a friend. When Pam was nominated by President Trump, my reaction was, this is a home run. As many of us are, I was only to be outdone by Senator Graham, who described the nomination as a grand slam, touchdown, hole-in-one, ace, hat trick, slam dunk, Olympic gold medal pick, and he's right. As the letter joined by more than 100 former Justice Department officials put it, quote, it's all too rare for senior Justice Department officials, much less attorneys general, to have such a wealth of experience in the day-to-day work of keeping our communities safe, end quote. Pam exemplifies and personifies the Department of Justice's mission to uphold the rule of law, to keep our communities safe, and to protect our rights and liberties as Americans. Pam has distinguished herself in her career in public service that has taken her from her small-town upbringing in Temple Terrace, Florida, to a hearing before this esteemed committee. After attending the University of Florida and Stetson University College of Law, she started her career as a local prosecutor in Hillsborough County, Florida. As a local prosecutor for nearly 2 decades, Pam kept her community safe, prosecuting violent criminals, drug dealers, those who had threatened the local community, and those who stood in opposition to the rule of law. Pam's fellow Floridians then elected her to serve as Florida's Attorney General, where she was the first woman in state history elected to that office. As a former state Attorney General myself, I can vouch for the deep experience that Pam Bondi has developed from serving in that role. As the chief law enforcement official in her state, she worked with local prosecutors to fight crime, worked to protect our constitutional rights, or the constitutional rights of Floridians, and stood up for the little guy by taking on abuses of power. As Florida's Attorney General, she worked tirelessly to combat the opioid crisis, fighting pill mills, and helping to combat the widespread misuse and trafficking of deadly drugs, including fentanyl, which have devastated families and communities all across our country. She stood up for Floridians in the wake of a 2008 financial crisis, leading to the National Mortgage Settlement Act, resulting in $56 billion in compensation to victims. And after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, Pam was there and stood up for Floridians by getting $2 billion from the companies responsible. On a more personal note, Pam has always taken it upon herself to help others. She's incredibly generous and someone I could always count on. She's truthful, she's tough, and she's a born leader. She has charted her own course with the rare combination of backbone and heart. The next Attorney General of the United States must restore trust by reversing the weaponization we've seen the last 4 years and refocusing that department to its core mission, administering justice. The next Attorney General must promote the rule of law, take on violent crime, keep our communities safe, and safeguard the God-given rights that each American has protected in our Constitution. I can think of no one more up to that task than Pam Bondi, a career prosecutor and widely respected Attorney General with the prudence, fortitude, and temperance for this incredibly important job. Mr. Chairman, it is truly an honor for me to introduce Pam Bondi to this committee and to our country here today and speak on her behalf, and it's my hope that her nomination will be swiftly confirmed.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Now, Ms. Bondi, would you please come forward, and before you're seated, I'd like to administer oath. Would you please raise your right hand and answer this question? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give to this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated and move ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I've had the opportunity to meet with almost all of you, and I greatly appreciate that. I'm grateful to President Trump and to this committee for your consideration to be the 87th Attorney General of the United States. I would not be here without my family. And if you can bear with me for just a moment, a lot of them have made a very long trip, and I wrote them all down so I don't forget anyone. My beautiful mother, who I wouldn't be here, a retired kindergarten teacher, would not be here without my mom. As of a week ago, it was 12 years since we lost my dad to leukemia. Feels like 12 days. My amazing husband, John, and his 2 incredible girls, Collins and Finley. Collins is a senior at University of Florida, and I think all of you on this committee will be very happy to know Finley is in cybersecurity. There's a third who is traveling abroad. I wish she could be here. My amazing father-in-law, David, my sister, Beth, My brother-in-law is home with my niece. My nephews, if you could just raise your hand, Evan, Jake, and soon-to-be niece Savannah. My brother Brad, a brilliant lawyer. My sister-in-law Tandy, and my nephews Justin, who just got a 4.0 at UVA. Rex, great college tennis player. Brad, great tennis player. Is Rhea here? And my niece, my beautiful niece Rhea, and the little guy is in school because he's 10. My friends, Leslie, Kathy, Dina, Tiffany, Kim, Paula, and so many of my former coworkers. And Ranking Member Durbin, if you want to get dirt on me, these women have known me since I was a child. Seriously, most of them. So thank you for indulging me in that. They've all made a very long trip to be here, and thank you for holding my hearing as well and not postponing it. I appreciate that. Thank you all. From the moment I interned at the state attorney's office in Tampa, Florida, all I wanted to do was be a prosecutor. The Supreme Court certified me, and I had 4 jury trials while still in law school. Lost most of them, but had 4 jury trials and never wanted to do anything else. I continued my career there, trying everything from DUIs, domestic violence cases, capital murder cases, the whole gamut. I became a lead trial attorney in courtroom every day, trying career criminals, was deputy chief of a division, and then ultimately was felony bureau chief, and eventually left to become Florida's 37th Attorney General for the state of Florida. Nothing has impacted my career more than my experience as a state prosecutor, because I got to know and still keep in touch with many victims and their families from when I was a prosecutor. Upon becoming Attorney General in 2011, I proudly served for 2 terms. I was term limited. I would probably still be there right now had I not been kicked out of office by term limits. I loved being Attorney General. I did my best to keep Florida safe, to continue to stand up for victims of crime, and to fight the opioid crisis and the drug crisis that was not only facing Florida, but this entire country. Out of the top 100, this is one of the things I'm the most proud of, oxycodone dispensers in the entire country, I believe it was 98 of them, 90 or 98 of them, lived in Florida. We fought for tough legislation. Kids were dropping dead every day. We fought for tough legislation, and after that legislation, none of those opioid dealers, doctors, practiced in Florida. We fought to eliminate human trafficking by raising awareness and prevention and talking to parents and talking to children. We also provided critical resources, including safe houses, that my state was lacking. On the civil side, we worked to protect consumers. We tackled everything, including off-label prescription marketing, which affects, as you know, many, many people who can't afford prescriptions as well. We partnered with states' attorneys general from both parties and federal agencies across administrations. We went after price gougers during hurricanes. If confirmed as the next Attorney General of the United States, my overriding objective will be to return the Department of Justice to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously prosecuting criminals. And that includes getting back to basics: gangs, drugs, terrorists, cartels, our border, and our foreign adversaries. That is what the American people expect, and that is what they deserve from the Department of Justice. If confirmed, I will do everything in my power, and it will be my great responsibility to make America safe again. Making America safe again also requires reducing recidivism. We have to fix the Bureau of Prisons, and I am looking on both sides of the aisle. The Bureau has suffered from years of mismanagement, lack of funding, and low morale. I was proud to support President Trump's First Step Act. I think more can be implemented and more can be done on that front. President Trump's leadership on criminal justice reform has demonstrated what is possible when a president is unafraid to do things that have been deemed to be too difficult. We have to reach across the aisle and get solutions for all of these problems. Like the president, I believe we are on the cusp of a new golden age where the Department of Justice can and will do better if I am confirmed. Lastly, and most importantly, if confirmed, I will fight every day to restore confidence and integrity to the Department of Justice and each of its components. The partisanship, the weaponization will be gone. America will have one tier of justice for all. In all this work, I'll collaborate closely with this committee. I will work with all of you, as I've committed to do when I met with almost all of you. And I will partner not only with the federal agencies, but with the state and local officials throughout our great country. I look forward to answering your questions today and working together for this country and our Constitution. Thank you, Senators.
I will ask first questions, and Senator Durbin, and then I'll call on the Democrat people the way that Senator Durbin would say so on their arrival or here by seniority, in the same way that on the House side. And I'll make sure that I don't abuse the 7 minutes. I want you to have your attention on this binder that I put up here. It gets to a key factor of each senator's role and oversight. It contains 144 oversight letters that I sent to the Biden-Harris Justice Department and its component agencies, with many of those letters in there to the FBI. Adding letters to the Inspector General, that would be about 165 letters. So I've sent more letters since you've been in my office before Christmas. Should you be confirmed, 144 letters will be your responsibility. The responses I have received so far fall in two categories. First, they weren't answered at all. Second, I received a response, but it didn't fully respond. Said another way, the Justice Department merely sent me words on a piece of paper. So, should you be confirmed, you'll have an obligation to respond even to the minority and consider a letter from them, even if my signature's not on it, as they want information. Will you commit to responding to my oversight requests as well as the requests of other members of the committee?
Chairman, either I or my top staff will personally review the letters and do everything we can to respond to you.
Your tenure as Florida Attorney General was impressive. You fought against pill mills, human trafficking. You eliminated a backlog of rape test kits in state labs. You fought against organized retail theft, and you were known to stand for law and order. With such achievements, it's easy to see why the people of Florida re-elected you in 2014 and why President-elect Trump nominated you to serve as the nation's chief law enforcement officer. So this gives you a chance to tell us on this committee and the people of this country what you're proud of as your record as Attorney General of Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Grassley. I was truly honored to serve the people of the state of Florida for 8 years, but it was a team effort. I had great people around me, many of whom are in this room today. And we did a lot. We did a lot to fight crime, and I've been reminiscing a lot since I was asked to take this nomination. Opioids, as I talked about, were a top priority right when I took office. When I was running for office, I went through the entire state of Florida. Parents were walking up to me, handing me pictures of their children who were deceased from opioid abuse. After I was elected, I took those pictures and I framed them in my office as a goal of stopping that fight, which I talked about in my opening statement. And if U.S. Attorney General, I'll bring those pictures back out, and they will be there to inspire me on the further drug abuse we're facing throughout this country. We also learned that something else was happening. Pregnant women were having babies as a result of being opioid dependent. We call it neonatal abstinence syndrome. We fought to educate mothers. We fought that issue as well. Fentanyl was wreaking havoc in our country, but it was just getting started. I actually fought my own party a bit on scheduling fentanyl because at that time people thought it was something you merely got in the hospital on a patch after surgery. Apples and oranges, and boy, do we all know that now, the difference. Fentanyl is raging throughout our country, and I will do everything I can to fight that with the agencies that fall under the Department of Justice. Human trafficking became a top priority for me as Attorney General. I had the opportunity on a bipartisan trip to go to Mexico, and the one thing I found out there, they were doing better than we were. They had safe houses. I saw things I never dreamed I would see, and all of these things in my past have formed the person I am right now sitting here before you. I came back to Florida. We started a human trafficking council, and we partnered with others, and we expanded and added safe houses in the state of Florida. I don't know how many are in this country right now, but I would like to partner with both sides, if confirmed, to continue those efforts.
I'd like to interrupt you
Yes, sir.
and go to another question. And I'll have another round so you can finish on that point. I'd like to ask you about something that's central to fighting government waste and fraud, the False Claims Act. I want you to know that Attorney General Garland calls me once a year. He called me yesterday to tell me the success of the False Claims Act. Since 1986, when I got it passed and President Reagan signed it, it's brought in $78 billion as of yesterday, his report, $2.9 billion for the year of 2024. Most of that's because of patriotic whistleblowers who found the fraud and brought the cases forward at their own risk. The Supreme Court has long upheld the law's constitutionality, but I want you to know, in your view, is the False Claims Act constitutional? Before you answer that, one time in the 1990s, one of the attorney generals said it wasn't constitutional, and when that same person by the name of Barr was back 5 years ago to be attorney general, he said it was constitutional. So if confirmed, will you commit? Well, answer that first question. Do you think it's constitutional? Would you defend the constitutionality of it?
I would defend the constitutionality, of course, of the False Claims Act, Senator.
Last question. If confirmed, would you commit to continuing DOJ's defense of the constitutionality of it? And will you assure the entire staff and funding levels to properly support and prosecute false claim cases?
Senator, the False Claims Act is so important, and especially by what you said with whistleblowers as well, and the protection and the money it brings back to our country. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your answers. Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Ms. Bondi, if you're successful in your nomination, this Democrat would like to give you 3 words of advice. Answer Grassley's letters. You'll never hear the end of it if you don't. At issue, I believe, in this nomination hearing is not your competence nor your experience. At issue is your ability to say no. More than any other cabinet official, the Attorney General has to be prepared to put the Constitution first and even tell the President of the United States you're wrong. The political danger and personal costs of such a decision are well documented. You have only to ask former Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr, whom Donald Trump sacked for lack of loyalty. And so I have three basic questions I'd like to ask you. Most Americans believe that central to the peaceful transition of power in a democracy is the acceptance of the results of an election. To my knowledge, Donald Trump has never acknowledged the legal results of the 2020 election. Are you prepared to say today under oath without reservation that Donald Trump lost the presidential contest to Joe Biden in 2020?
Ranking Member Durbin, President Biden is the President of the United States. He was duly sworn in, and he is the President of the United States. There was a peaceful transition of power. President Trump left office and was overwhelmingly elected in 2024.
Do you have any doubts that Joe Biden had the majority of votes, electoral votes, necessary to be elected president in 2020?
You know, Senator, all I can tell you as a prosecutor is from my firsthand experience. And I accept the results. I accept, of course, that Joe Biden is president of the United States. But what I can tell you is what I saw firsthand when I went to Pennsylvania as an advocate for the campaign. I was an advocate for the campaign, and I was on the ground in Pennsylvania, and I saw many things there. But do I accept the results? Of course I do. Do I agree with what happened? And I saw so much. You know, no one from either side of the aisle should want there to be any issues with election integrity in our country. We should all want our elections to be free and fair, and the rules and the laws to be followed.
I think that question deserved a yes or no. And I think the length of your answer is an indication that you weren't prepared to answer yes. Have you heard the recording of President Trump on January 2nd, 2021, when he urged the Secretary of State of Georgia to, quote, find 11,780 votes and declare him the winner of that state?
No, I've heard about it through clips, but no, Senator, I've not heard it.
What was your reaction to President Trump making that call?
I would have to listen to the tape, Senator.
Well, the quote that I give you is exact. He said to the Georgia Secretary of State, find 11,780 votes.
Do you have the entire context of that call? I feel like it was much longer than that and may have been taken out of context.
It was an hour long.
Right.
And you can certainly listen to it. I hope you will. Every American should. As a former prosecutor, are you not concerned that the President of the United States called a state election official and asked him to find enough votes to change the results of the election?
Senator, I have not listened to the hour-long conversation, but it's my understanding that is not what he asked him to do.
You need to listen to it. Let me ask a third question. Do you believe that the January 6 rioters who've been convicted of violent assaults on police officers should be pardoned?
Senator, if confirmed as Attorney General of the United States, the pardons, of course, fall under the President. But if asked to look at those cases, I will look at each case and advise on a case-by-case basis, just as I did my entire career as a prosecutor.
You also advise the President on pardons as part of your responsibility as Attorney General. And so I'm asking you, do you believe that those who've been convicted of the January 6 riot, violent assaults on our police officers, should be pardoned? That's a simple question.
So, Senator, I have not seen any of those files, of course. If confirmed and if asked to advise the President, I will look at each and every file. But let me be very clear in speaking to you. I condemn any violence on a law enforcement officer in this country.
Let me ask you about your work as a lobbyist for Ballard Partners. You did not list your current position as a partner at the lobbying firm, nor the work you've done for your Ballard partner clients, such as lobbying for the country of Qatar for $115,000 a month, and for corporate giants Amazon and Uber when you're asked about conflicts of interest. Why do you believe your work as a lobbyist does not constitute potential conflicts of interest?
Well, Senator, first, that was the amount my firm received. I believe multiple people represented the country of Qatar within my firm. My role, and I am very proud of the work that I did, it was a short time and I wish it had been longer for Qatar, was anti-human trafficking efforts leading into the World Cup, which is something I'd like to talk about later too. I was registered as FARA along with many members of my firm. That was the sole portion of my representation for Qatar. Now, if there are any conflicts with anyone I represented in private practice, I would consult with the career ethics officials within the department and make the appropriate decision. I would also like to point out to you, I don't believe that I would be the first Attorney General who has represented and advocated for businesses in their past.
Of course not. The question is whether you will recuse yourself from any case involving your Ballard clients. One of those clients was the GEO Group, was it not?
GEO, yes.
A private prison company you lobbied for. It manages correctional institutions and detention facilities. The GEO Group has faced criticism for safety violations, inadequate health care, and poor management. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is GEO's largest source of revenue. Under the Trump administration, GEO stands to earn hundreds of millions of dollars by detaining immigrants if there is this mass deportation. Would you sense any conflict of interest if you're asked to judge the performance of this government contractor?
Senator, I will consult with the career ethics officials within the Department of Justice and make the appropriate decision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Graham.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You forgot to say that John's family was from South Carolina.
The upstate, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'll give you a pass on that. From Anderson, by the way. So, listen, President Trump asked a bunch of us, who would you pick for Attorney General? How many of you got asked that on our side? Probably didn't ask Dick, but he asked me. I said Pam Bondi. That's like an easy decision. I couldn't think of anybody more qualified that he knew, that he trusted. And it's okay to have, you were his lawyer, right?
Yes, sir. I represented him when they tried to impeach him the first time as part of White House Counsel, Office of Special Counsel.
Being Trump's lawyer prepares you for many things. So, yeah, you have a longstanding relationship with the president. He trusts you. That's a good thing. That's probably why President Kennedy picked his brother, Bobby Kennedy. I guess you can say no to your older brother. I'm sure he would. But this idea there's something bad is ridiculous. Who do you pick? You pick people you know. You pick people you trust, people that you're qualified. I'm glad he picked you. He knows you, he trusts you, and you're highly qualified. So the idea that there's something wrong with that is just absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about the job you're about to have here. Do you support making certain drug cartels in Mexico foreign terrorist organizations?
Senator, I personally went to Mexico. I personally dealt with these cartels when I was a state prosecutor, and they are a grave and violent threat to our country. Yes, Senator.
Advising the president. Good, good. Now, when it comes to Crossfire Hurricane, are those days over if you're Attorney General?
Absolutely.
Okay. Lake and Riley, are you familiar with that case?
Sadly, I am, Senator Graham.
Do you know why the man who killed her was released from custody? He was paroled due to detention capacity at the Central Processing Center in El Paso, Texas. Now, that's not your call. You'll be DOJ. But do you agree with me that the statute regarding parole doesn't allow parole to be based on we don't have detention beds? There's nothing in that statute would authorize parole based on lack of capacity. Are you familiar with that statute?
Yes, sir, and that's frightening.
Yeah, well, it's frightening. Are you going to fix it?
I am going to do everything in my power to fix it if confirmed as Attorney
You're going to
General.
advise President Trump we need more beds Tom Holman's the guy that's going to do this, but would you as Attorney General say we need more bed space so Lake and Riley never happens again?
Senator, my job, if confirmed as Attorney General, will be to keep America safe.
Do you think we
And that
need more
include-
detention space?
And that includes having enough space for violent criminals, for people that should not be in this country,
Yeah.
who have committed violent crimes.
To
and
the
Lake
public.
and Riley is Lake and Riley is one of many.
Yeah. But 41,000 beds in this country to detain people. We got like millions of people here illegally. We let this dude go because we didn't have any place to put him. I hope those days are over. And if, Tom, you're listening out there, I hope you'll create enough detention space to make sure we don't find this dilemma ever again. Do you think we're at war? And if so, who with?
Oh, Senator, we're at war on so many fronts.
Are we at war with ISIS?
Of course, we're at war with ISIS.
They're at war with us. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, Senator.
Do you think since our withdrawal from Afghanistan, threats to our homeland have gone up from ISIS?
Yes.
Okay, March 7th, 2024, General Corella. I assess ISIS-K retains the capability and will to attack the U.S. and Western interests abroad in as little as 6 months with little or no warning. That's March of 2024. General McKenzie, ISIS-K has a strong desire to attack the United States after it began to grow in Afghanistan following U.S. exit in August 2021. He also stated the threat to ISIS-K from ISIS-K is growing. Major General Quantock, the U.S. remains target number one for ISIS-K. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I don't have my security clearance, but from everything I've read and heard, ISIS is one of the greatest threats.
Okay, well, when you get your security clearance, you're going to find out these people are coming after us and they want to kill us. So I would like to have a strategy to deal with the ISIS threat that's beyond just the law enforcement model. Does that make sense to you, that we should use every tool in the toolbox?
Senator, that includes wrapping in our state and local officials too, and better cooperation throughout our country and our world.
I totally agree. Do you support reauthorizing FISA in 2025?
Senator, I believe 702 is up in 2026.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry,
believe it's
26.
2026, and we will closely be looking at that. FISA is a very
Do
important
you agree
tool.
that the 702 provides important intel gathering capability to protect our nation?
Extremely important.
Okay. So, Pam, you're about to step into a job that's one of the most important jobs in any democracy. Let's go back to pardons. If I'm a lawyer for somebody in jail, would you promise to listen to the application and read it before you made a decision?
Yes.
Okay. No matter who you are. Good. That's the way it works. People want to bargain with you up here. Will you do this? Will you do that? All I ask you to do is call it as you see it, hire good, competent people, and give the president the best legal advice you can, run the Department of Justice in a manner that other people would want to join it one day. Growing up, I had a fondness for the FBI. I watched the show, I think it's every Sunday, wanted to be an FBI agent. Right now, the FBI needs an image overhaul. So you have a real task ahead of you in two areas: to restore trust to many Americans who have lost trust in the Department of Justice, and to make sure that this country is safe from drug cartels that are killing 3,000 Americans every 2 weeks for money, to go after these people, and to protect our homeland that's under siege. I think you're the perfect pick at one of the most dangerous times in American history, and I look forward to supporting you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Bondi.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for meeting with me. I greatly appreciate that.
It was a pleasure. Ms. Bondi, you were a courtroom prosecutor for a great many years. As a courtroom prosecutor, did you ever have an enemies list?
No, Senator.
And you went on to be Florida's Attorney General. As Florida's Attorney General, did you ever have an enemies list?
No, Senator.
As Florida's Attorney General, you were responsible for hiring into the Florida Department of Attorney General, correct?
Senator, the Attorney General's office in Florida is the third largest in the state, approximately 1,400 employees and approximately 400 lawyers. Only California and Texas are our bigger offices.
And you were
So,
responsible
yes.
for hiring into that office while you were Attorney General?
Yes,
Would you
Senator.
have hired someone into the Florida Attorney General's office who you knew had an enemies list?
Senator, to cut to the chase, you're clearly talking about Kash Patel. I don't believe he has an enemies list. He made a quote on TV, which I have not heard. I saw your sign, or Senator Durbin's sign, about Kash. But I know that Kash Patel has had 60 jury trials as a public defender, as a prosecutor. He has great experience in the Intel Department, Department of Defense. I have known Kash, and I believe that Kash is the right person at this time for this job. You'll have the ability to question Mr. Patel.
And I'm
when-
questioning you
when
right
you
now
do.
about whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Thank you. The FBI's, what is the FBI's role in national security and counterterrorism, and how important is that role?
You know, Senator, I believe now more than ever, counterterrorism is so important and vital in our country. We are facing such incredible threats here and abroad. I'm sure many of you saw former FBI Director Wray's interview on 60 Minutes. He talked about the threats that, frankly, again, I don't have my security clearance,
Yeah,
but the
but
threats
given that-
facing us, Senator, from China right now that are so great.
Given
the
that-
sleeper cells within our country.
Given that importance, is it responsible to call for shutting down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work? And will you, as Attorney General, impede or shut down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work?
Senator,
questions.
Senator, I believe that national security is vital right now for our country on so many fronts. I could continue to discuss
And the
many
FBI's
others.
role in that?
And the FBI plays a vital role in counterterrorism
Which you
throughout
will
our
or will
world.
not shut down?
I will look at each agency. I have no intention of shutting anything down right now, Senator. I am not in that office yet, and if confirmed, I will look at each individual agency and how it should be managed, but counterterrorism right now in our world is vital.
You have said that Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted in the Trump administration. What Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted and why?
I said that on TV. I said prosecutors will be prosecuted to finish the quote, if bad. Investigators will be investigated. You know, we all take an oath, Senator, to uphold the law. None of us are above the law. Let me give you a really good example of a bad lawyer within the Justice Department, a guy named Klein Smith, who altered a FISA warrant, one of the most important things we can do in this country. So will everyone be held to an equal, fair system of justice if I am the next Attorney General? Absolutely. And no one is above the law.
Under what circumstances will you prosecute journalists for what they write?
I believe in the freedom of speech. Only if anyone commits a crime. It's pretty basic, Senator, with anything, with any victim. And this goes back to my entire career for 18 years as a prosecutor and then 8 years as Florida's Attorney General. You find the facts of the case, you apply the law in good faith, and you treat everyone fairly.
And it would not be appropriate for a prosecutor to start with a name and look for a crime. It's a prosecutor's job to start with a crime and look for a name, correct?
Senator, I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in 2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward, or we're going to lose our country.
Yeah, I think the concern is that weaponization of the Justice Department may well occur under your tenure. And we want to make sure that that's not the case, that you remain independent, that you remain able to and willing to tell the president no when that's necessary to protect the Constitution and the integrity of the department. So that's where I'm asking these questions. We talked in the meeting about the contacts policy that has prevailed really since Senator Hatch sat in that chair and demanded it of the Clinton Justice Department through all the administration since then, with the exception of a brief period under Attorney General Gonzalez, which he corrected and which did not end well for him. There has been a contacts policy that limits contacts between the White House and the Department of Justice to a very few senior officials on each side. In your role as Attorney General, if you are confirmed, will you maintain, defend, and enforce that longstanding contacts policy?
Senator, yes, I will meet with White House counsel, and I will meet with the appropriate officials and follow the contacts policy.
My time has expired. Thank you, Ms. Bondi.
Senator Cornyn.
Ms. Bondi, your testimony is music to my ears.
Thank you.
One of the things that I have been most concerned about over certainly the last 4 years and extending back during President Trump's administration is the weaponization and politicalization of the Department of Justice, which together with the FBI is one of the most important institutions in this country. If people don't trust that their elected officials will faithfully enforce the law or administer equal justice under the law, they've lost faith in America. And that disturbs me greatly, and I know it does you too, based on what you said. So I'm delighted to hear you say what you have said, but I want to talk about some specific topics. Time is short. First, the border. I believe President Biden and Vice President Harris had presided over one of the biggest humanitarian and public safety disasters in American history. Senator Cruz and I represent a state with 1,200 miles of common border with America. But as you pointed out with fentanyl, what happens at the border doesn't stay at the border. Fentanyl poisoning is the most common cause of death of young people between the age of 18 and 45. We know where it comes from. Yes. The precursors come from China. They go to the cartels. They mix them up, make them look like innocuous pills. And young people take them and die. It's just that simple and that tragic. So there's just so much that we could talk about with regard to the border, but you know, I know people voted for President Trump in large part because of his promise to restore security at the border. Will you do everything within your power as Attorney General to enforce the laws on the books, including the President's executive orders, which I anticipate he will be signing on January the 20th when he is sworn in, and help do everything you can and the Department of Justice can is to restore security to our southern border?
Yes, Senator, absolutely.
One example is, of course, if you come here to the from anywhere in the country and you show up at the border under the Biden and Harris administration policies, you'll simply be released into the interior of the country, either to await a trial date, which may never occur due to the enormous backlog, or you will simply be paroled. And I know parole has a special connotation in the criminal law, but in this context, as you know, it's designed to be administered on a case-by-case basis. Yet President Biden and Vice President Harris had granted parole, that is, released people into the United States on a categorical basis, or anybody who shows up, or because they don't have the detention facilities to keep them. So do you believe Laken Riley would be alive today if President Biden and Vice President Harris had enforced the law and secured the border?
Senator, he should not have been in our country. And then Laken Riley would have been alive. And I don't think it's just Laken Riley. There are so many victims throughout our country. Not only that, we're all familiar with the violent gangs who are coming into our country, walking into our country freely through the open border. The cartels, the gangs, Venezuela's let people out of their prisons. It's been reported. I don't have the security clearance yet to see what's happening, but I know, we all know, there are criminals throughout our country, and it is my commitment to you on both sides of the aisle that I will do everything in my power with the agencies that fall under me if I am confirmed to make America safe again. We have to do that, Senator.
Well, many of us, of course, see classified information on the Intelligence Committee or just generally in our duties as a senator. And so you're not going to feel any better about the blinking lights, the danger that Director Wray has talked about. In my closing moments here, I want to revisit an issue that is of particular importance. 60% of the President's daily brief, which is the intelligence brief that the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA Director delivered to the President, comes from Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I've called this the most important law that most people have never heard of. I know you have, and you're familiar with it, but I want to ask you a few questions about that. It's been called the crown jewel of U.S. intelligence. And of course, it cannot be legally used to spy on American citizens. And if it is, it ought to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I know you would agree with that. But there have been some, as you know, and as you pointed out to Senator Graham, we have a temporary extension of the existing authorization for the use of the intelligence community to target foreign threats to our national security that expires in 2026. And I'd like you just to confirm here on the record that you will enforce that law and you can support the law as it is written.
Senator, I haven't read the entire 702 in front of you, but I will commit to reading that and doing everything I can to keep America safe again.
Of course you will. So Director Ratliff, who's going to be, I'm going to go to his hearing on for CIA Director. Of course, he was confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Some have argued that in order to query or look at lawfully collected FISA 702 product, that you need to get a warrant requirement in order to show probable cause that a crime, including espionage, perhaps has been committed. But Director Ratliff has written that a warrant requirement may not achieve its intended objectives and could hinder national security efforts. Do you share Director Ratliff's concerns?
I would read his memo, and I will speak to you after I read his memo, Senator.
Well, we need to have I hope you and I can continue this conversation after this, because I think there's a lot of misinformation with regard to how Section 702 works. I'm happen to be one of the members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We read that product on a regular basis, and it is not used to spy on American people. I think what's fundamentally missing is a lack of trust in the intelligence community, including the FBI, which I'm hoping you and Mr. Patel can restore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a good meeting this week. Thank you for that. And I appreciated your priorities on human trafficking that you mentioned today, that work, as well as fentanyl and some of your other prosecution experience. We had some similar backgrounds in doing that. And I want to talk about, first of all, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, one of the premier offices in the country. This office has been instrumental in combating violent crime, dismantling street gangs, taking fentanyl off our streets, enforcing civil rights laws after George Floyd's murder, ensuring victims of fraud get justice. Do you agree that it should be a priority to support U.S. attorneys, frontline prosecutors, and case agents who work hard every single day on our streets?
Senator, I think that is one of the most important things in our country right now, and there are so many good men and women within the Justice Department throughout our country, as well as all the law enforcement agencies. Yes, they work very hard, and they will be supported.
I'm concerned about some of the proposals that could put cuts in the COPS program, burn JAG programs. I know you're familiar with those. Senator Murkowski and I lead the COPS reauthorization bill. Will you commit to continue to support those programs?
Senator, I will read everything about those programs because that is a top priority of mine, and I would love to meet with you on that and Senator Murkowski to support law enforcement and those programs.
Thank you. Independence from political interference is vital to the legitimacy and success of the Department of Justice. I was honestly troubled by some of the answers to Senator Durbin's questions. We will continue that discussion, I'm sure, on the committee about the election. But I want to focus on the investigation, charging decisions. As a prosecutor, I'm sure you had this experience. I would get calls from people, hey, that's just a kid, give him a break. And I remember one answer I gave was, he's 40 years old, he's not a kid. But that kind of interference is attempted all the time. And one of my concerns here, whether it's a call from a friend, a corporate lobbyist, a White House, it has been very clear that the attorney generals of both parties have established clear policies to ensure the White House doesn't tamper with criminal investigations and prosecutions. At Attorney General Mike Mukasey's hearing, he made clear that any attempt by the White House, and these are the words, to interfere with a case is not to be countenanced. Any call to a line assistant or to a United States attorney from a political person relating to a case is to be cut and curtailed. Do you agree with this statement?
Senator, yes, I believe that the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently. The number one job is to enforce the law fairly and even-handedly, and that's what will be done if I am confirmed as the Attorney General.
So you will provide an assurance to every member of this committee that the Justice Department will only follow the facts and the law, and the White House will play no role in cases investigated or brought?
Senator, it will be my job, if confirmed as Attorney General, to make those decisions. Politics will not play a part. I've demonstrated that my entire career as a prosecutor, as Attorney General, and I will continue to do that if you confirm me as the 87th Attorney General of the United States of America.
In an earlier question, with some of my colleagues talked about China and the risk, yet you have a nominee from this incoming administration, Kash Patel, the pick to head the FBI, have serious concerns about him, has referred to the FBI's Intel Division, which is responsible for protecting us from foreign adversaries like China, as, quote, the biggest problem the FBI has had, and he said that he wants to, quote, break that component out of the FBI. Do you agree?
I have not seen those comments from Mr. Patel. I would review them, but we have to do everything we can to protect our country. Again, Mr. Patel would fall under me and the Department of Justice, and I will ensure that all laws are followed, and so will he.
Okay. There are many decisions made by the FBI director, having seen a number of them do their work, that can be made. While I agree you would be the boss of Kash Patel, I'm not sure that you would be able to intervene with every decision or position that he had or know what he's doing. So let's continue. Do you agree it is the duty of the Justice Department to defend the laws Congress passes? And will you commit to do even when the president may disagree with an act campaigned against its passage or called for its repeal? President Reagan's AG, William French Smith, said the department policy was the department has the duty to defend an act of Congress whenever a reasonable argument can be made in its support. So I'm specifically referring to the 2022 law that I long led that we passed to empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices, major savings for seniors. Will you commit to defend the law against the lawsuits from Big Pharma?
Senator, I was involved in big pharma cases when I was Attorney General of the state of Florida, and I will commit to protect the laws of the United States of America.
Okay, thank you. That would also, same question, with the Supreme Court is going to be hearing a challenge to the Affordable Care Act's coverage of preventative services. And despite the fact that you twice joined suits to have the entire Affordable Care Act invalidated, will you commit to defending this law?
Yeah, I believe this is very different. It's a very isolated, it's different. It's not the entire Affordable Care Act, but I will, it's pending litigation, of course, within the department.
Since the 1990s, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act has protected patients, providers, and facilities that provide reproductive health services. Will you commit to continuing to enforce the FACE Act to address violence and threats against those providing reproductive health care services?
Senator, the FACE Act not only protects abortion clinics, but it also protects pregnancy centers and people going for counseling. The law should be applied even-handedly. Yes, Senator.
So you'll uphold the enforcement of that law?
I'll uphold the enforcement of the law, Senator.
Okay, and I will ask my antitrust questions in the next round. We had a good discussion about that, and I do appreciate the nominee that has been put in place for the antitrust division, and there's incredibly important work that has to be done in that division. So
Gail
thank
Slater
you.
is remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank all of my colleagues for abiding by the 7-minute rule. Before I call on Senator Lee, I want everybody to plan on our first break would be about 11:50, and that would be 30 minutes for lunch. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Bondi, for being here today. I, too, share the assessment that Gail Slater is great. Had a great meeting with her yesterday. And just thrilled that you're here and that you're willing to serve. I'd like to talk to you as a longtime lawyer and one who has handled a variety of criminal matters about the Fourth Amendment. What can you tell us about the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement and why it's so important?
Well, the warrant requirement is so important, which I've dealt with that since I was in my 20s as a state prosecutor. A warrant is so important because it protects citizens' rights, and that's why it's so important.
And it does that specifically because under the Fourth Amendment, you're required to go to a judge, and you're required to show a judge evidence providing probable cause, and based on that probable cause, you can describe with particularity the things or persons to be searched or seized. And on that basis, the judge may issue or not issue the warrant, but without it, you can't get it. Now, this is time-consuming, no doubt, right?
Oh, I've done many of them, yes. It's very time-consuming, Senator.
And there's probably not a law enforcement officer anywhere in the world who wouldn't acknowledge that they could save time if they didn't have to go about it. And yet we require it. Why is that so important that we do it?
Well, it's so important for the reasons you just laid out. When I said I've done many of them, I've approved them and not approved them as a state prosecutor, because law enforcement, there are checks and balances, and law enforcement must bring these warrants to prosecutors to see if there is sufficient evidence. Then after that's done, they have to take them to a judge to have a judge sign them. So there have to be sufficient checks and balances throughout our system.
So even after you as Attorney General, as the chief law enforcement officer and prosecutorial authority in the state of Florida approved it within your office, you still had to go to the judge. And if it was late at night, early in the morning, didn't matter when, you had to find a judge.
All hours of the night. That was more when I was a state prosecutor. As Attorney General, the office of the statewide prosecutor, Nick Cox, would have done that many, many times at all hours throughout the night and woken up many, many judges throughout the state of Florida.
Is there an exception to the warrant requirement that exists anytime it would be inconvenient for prosecutors or anytime national security might be involved?
I'm not certain about national security, but absolutely no for a state
Right.
prosecutor.
Yeah, there's
no exception.
There's no catch-all exception that just says this is important or it would be inconvenient for the prosecutor, and with good reason.
Right.
We've learned through sad experience over many hundreds of years, not only in our own country, but also in that of our mother country, what happens when you don't have this in the loop. So you've been asked today a little bit about Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, also known as FISA. There are those who have repeatedly assured members of this committee, including myself, that don't worry, content of phone calls or electronic communications involving American citizens, sometimes resulting in the quote-unquote incidental collection of American citizens' private conversations. Don't worry, their Fourth Amendment rights are just fine. And yet, when they incidentally collect the communications of American citizens, either because they're perhaps unwittingly talking to somebody who might be an agent of a foreign power and themselves under 702 surveillance, they get onto this big database. And at times, there are those in the government, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who have gotten into that database and done so, of course, without a warrant because there currently is no warrant requirement. This has the effect of what we call a de facto backdoor warrantless search. Would you agree with me that that is potentially concerning anytime an American citizen's private conversations are intercepted, stored, whether as an incidental collection or otherwise? They ought not be searched without some kind of probable cause showing. I assume you'd agree with me on that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's important. Sometimes people will defend that by saying national security is involved, as if that's the beginning and the end of the inquiry. That has never been the case, and I hope and pray it never will be the case, because that's not what the Fourth Amendment says, not what it does, not what it ever can be. So it's my sincere hope that the next time FISA 702 comes up for reauthorization, Congress finally do what it has been avoiding for a long time, which is to ensure that this doesn't happen. We've heard again and again from people who, if you're confirmed to this position, will soon be your predecessors, prior occupants of the position to which you've been nominated and to which Mr. Patel has been nominated. Don't worry, we have good people. Don't worry, we have good systems in place. Don't worry, it's as good as a warrant requirement, the internal approval procedure that we have within our system. And yet we found out time and time again that this has happened, by some accounts, hundreds of thousands of times. These things have been accessed where searches for an American citizen's private communications that have been intercepted and stored through incidental collection have been searched without those safeguards being met, including instances where people just wanted to check on, to cite one example, whether his father was cheating on his mother, or in other instances, doing background checks on someone looking to lease an apartment that he owned and was looking to rent out. This is unacceptable, and we've got to fix it. Speaking of unacceptable, we have seen over the last few years the weaponization of government, specifically within the Department of Justice, against law-abiding Americans. Law-abiding Americans whose offense was something along the lines of, them exercising their constitutional rights, ranging from Catholics attempting to practice their faith, to parents showing up to school board meetings, to people showing up to engage in peaceful protesting outside of abortion clinics. As Attorney General, how will you prevent the weaponization of the Department of Justice against Americans?
And Senator, you just gave the classic example of what's been happening regarding the weaponization. Going after parents at a school board meeting has got to stop. For practicing your religion, sending informants into Catholic churches must stop.
What about branding parents as domestic terrorists or trying to incarcerate one's political opponent as a sitting president of the United States?
Will stop, must stop. Your Senator.
That is exactly the sort of answer I was hoping and expecting to receive from you, and I look forward to doing everything I can to help get you confirmed. I've been pleased with your answers thus far. I've enjoyed knowing you, considering you a friend for many years, and look forward to the great things you will do as Attorney General of the United States. You have my emphatic support and my vote.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi, and to your family and supporters. Thank you for your service, and I look forward to our conversation today. I have a simple three-factor test when considering the executive branch nominees before us. Do you have the qualifications and experience to do the job, policy views to do the job in the best interest of the American people, and the character and integrity to conduct your job, and yours in particular, with the independence that the role requires? You demonstrably have the relevant experience. I understand we will not see eye to eye on some or even many policies, but we had a constructive conversation last week about our shared interest in fighting the opioid epidemic, countering human trafficking, criminal justice reform, and supporting law enforcement. But I need to know that you share a core value, ensuring the Department of Justice remains free from partisan or political influence, in particular by the White House. So I look forward to our discussion about that today. As Attorney General, if confirmed, who would be your client?
My oath would be to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The people of America would be my client. Now, it is also my job to advise the president. My client are the people of America.
A simple question of constitutional interpretation. Is President-elect Trump eligible to run for another term as president in 2028?
No, Senator, not unless they change the Constitution.
Thank you. One of the concerns I've raised with you is safeguarding the Department of Justice's independence in the face of some promises on the campaign trail by then-candidate Trump that he would use the department to target his political adversaries, or that he might interfere with prosecution. What would you do if your career DOJ prosecutors came to you with a case to prosecute, grounded in the facts and law, but the White House directs you to drop the case?
Senator, if I thought that would happen, I would not be sitting here today. That will not happen, will not happen. Every case will be prosecuted based on the facts and the law that is applied in good faith. Period. Politics have got to be taken out of the system.
I
this
agree with
department
you.
has been weaponized for years and years and years,
But let
and
me,
it has
if
to
I
stop.
might, thank you. Let me, if I might, Madam Attorney General, refer you back to Senator Durbin's opening comments about previous attorneys general, our former colleague Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr. I don't think it's credible to say that it may never happen that the president-elect would direct an unethical or illegal act. I think both of those attorneys general found themselves crosswise with the then president by doing things he didn't welcome or approve of. Just answer the question for me, if you would. I know you may not expect it. I know you wouldn't have accepted this nomination if you thought it possible. But let's imagine that once again, President-elect Trump issues a directive or order to you or to the FBI director that is outside the boundaries of ethics or law. What will you do?
Senator, I will never speak on a hypothetical, especially one saying that the president would do something illegal. What I can tell you is my duty, if confirmed as the Attorney General, will be to the Constitution and the United States of America. And the most important oath, part of that oath that I will take, are the last four words, so help me God.
Given the importance of that oath, I hope you can understand the importance of repeated questions from some of us about the importance of having independence in the Department of Justice. It has a long tradition of independent special prosecutors, especially to handle high-profile or often political cases. If you got credible evidence of a criminal violation by a White House official, including even the president, would you bring in a special prosecutor?
Senator, that's a hypothetical. I can tell you what I do know is special prosecutors have been abused in the past on both sides. We have seen that for many, many years. They have cost the taxpayers countless dollars, countless. And I will look at each situation on a case-by-case basis and consult the appropriate career ethics officials within the department to make that decision.
Attorney General, do you think special counsels need to be confirmed by the Senate?
I will follow the law and I will consult with the appropriate ethics officials regarding the law. Right now, they do not need to be Senate confirmed, of course.
But you did sign an 11th Circuit brief arguing that they should be.
I will follow the law, Senator. That's why I said that.
Understood, but I was just getting to the clarity about the difference between a
Absolutely.
position you've advocated and what the current law is. Thank you for that. Look, bluntly, to me, refusing to answer a hypothetical when there is clear and concrete previous history raises some concerns for me. I think Chris Wray has done an outstanding job as FBI director at avoiding political pressure, and although he was chosen by President Trump, he's being driven out so that he can be replaced. My perception, I've not yet met with Mr. Patel, by a loyalist who has publicly said he will do what the president asks him. Given that Attorney General Barr was asked to go find evidence of election interference and improprieties, went and looked for the evidence and said, I can't find any, and was then dismissed, I'm just going to ask you one last time. Can you clarify for me that in following ethics and the law, you'd be willing to resign if ordered to do something improper?
Senator, I wouldn't work at a law firm. I wouldn't be a prosecutor. I wouldn't be attorney general. If anyone asked me to do something improper and I felt I had to carry that out, of course I would not do that. That's one of the main things you learn when you're a young prosecutor is to do the right thing. And I believe that has continued with me throughout my very long career.
As we discussed, protecting American invention and innovation, American intellectual property, is a real concern of mine and of several others on this committee. I look forward to talking with you about that pressing concern. But the most important question I had for you today is whether you will be willing and able to stand up to politicization and interference in the Department of Justice. And I look forward to further clarification from you about the specifics of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator.
Senator Cruz would be next, but he's not here, so I call on Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, welcome. Congratulations. Can we agree that legitimacy is important to America's criminal justice system?
Yes, Senator.
Can we agree that legitimacy is important to the Department of Justice, which in part administers our criminal justice system?
Yes, Senator.
And if Americans come to believe that our criminal justice system or our Department of Justice is acting illegitimately, that makes Americans less likely to accept the results of that system, does it not?
Yes, Senator.
And that makes Americans less likely to follow the substantive laws that we pass that are administered by the Department of Justice. Isn't that true?
Yes, Senator.
And if that happens, we have chaos, don't we?
Chaos.
And the social contract is breached, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you remember a person by the name of Michael Avenatti?
Yes.
Several years ago, he was a media star here in Washington.
An attorney, correct?
Yes. He was a media star. And many members of our media loved him because he persistently bashed Donald Trump. And he was on TV every day. He was on CNN more than Wolf Blitzer. Do you know where Mr. Avenatti is today?
I believe he's sitting in prison, Senator.
He's in jail because he was a crook. And the Department of Justice helped put him there, didn't it?
Yes, Senator.
Do you remember a gentleman by the name of Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yes, Senator.
Boy genius. So smart and so powerful that he thought he could command the tides. So smart and so powerful and so rich that he would go to meetings with serious people like Bill Clinton, like Tony Blair, looking like a slob, looking like a fourth runner-up to a John Belushi lookalike contest. And he thought it was cute. Where's Mr. Bankman-Fried today?
I believe he is in prison, and I believe that's from the Netflix series I saw as well.
Mm-hmm. Because he's a crook. And who helped put him there?
The Department of Justice, Senator.
Can we agree that there's some really, really good men and women at the Department of Justice?
Many, many great men and women in the Justice Department, as well, Senator, as all the law enforcement agencies that fall within the Department of Justice. They're out there risking their lives, especially the law enforcement officers, every single day.
Can we agree, though, that there have been and may be today some bad people at the Department of Justice?
Yes, Senator.
We don't know for sure because for the last 4 years, the curtains there have been tightly drawn. But I think a minority of people there, have delegitimized America's criminal justice system. The most destabilizing act that I saw in the past 4 years, maybe in the history of the department, is when Attorney General Garland decided on the basis of dubious facts and untested legal theories to criminally prosecute a former president of the United States. And not only that, this is the special part. He decided to do it after the former president of the United States had announced that he was going to run against Attorney General Garland's boss, didn't he?
Senator, are you referring to going after a political opponent?
I think so. Now, this is one person's opinion. That kind of stupid takes a plan. And I say that because, number one, this is America. That had never happened before in America. That's the sort of thing that happens in a country whose Powerball jackpot is 287 chickens and a goat. It doesn't happen here. And I call it stupid because it broke the seal. It broke the seal. It normalized it. There are a lot of ambitious prosecutors in America, Democrat and Republican. And I'll bet you right now there's some prosecutor in a particular state thinking about, well, maybe I ought to file criminal charges against President Biden's inner circle for conspiring to conceal his mental decline. And that's the road we're headed down. And you've got to fix it, Counselor. You've got to fix it. And here's, what, in my judgment, what I would ask you to do. Find out who the bad guys are and the bad women and get rid of them. Find out who the good people are and lift them up. But do it on the basis of facts and evidence and fairness. Because the temptation of some people is going to be, they're going to tell you, look, two wrongs don't make a right, but they do make it even. Don't resist that temptation. Help us restore legitimacy to the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Bondi, and to your family.
Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with me in my office. And I have to say, I'm sympathetic always to a former Attorney General, particularly having been one myself. But I am, I have to say also, really troubled, deeply disturbed by some of your responses and non-responses to the question that you've been asked today. You say the right things, that you're going to be the people's lawyer. That's what you have to say to be here. But I believe being the people's lawyer means you have to be able to say no to the President of the United States. You have to speak truth to power. You have to be able to say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. You dodged that question when you were asked directly by Senator Durbin. You have to be able to say that January 6th insurrectionists who committed violence shouldn't be pardoned. You have to be able to say that a nominee for the FBI director who says he has an enemy list, and that's just the beginning of what he has said in terms of politicizing, deeply weaponizing the FBI against political opponents, that he shouldn't be the FBI director. You know, we have some history here with your predecessors, Barr, Sessions, and others, who perhaps sincerely, when they sat where you are now, said that they would say no, but they were working with a president that expected them to be his Roy Cohn, his personal attorney. Do you really think that you can avoid the disgrace that they encountered or the repercussions from the White House if you say no to the president? And so my question to you is, can you say no to the President of the United States when he asks you to do something unethical or illegal?
Senator, first, I need to clarify something that you said, that I have to sit up here and say these things. No, I don't. I sit up here and speak the truth. I'm not going to sit up here and say anything that I need to say to get confirmed by this body. I don't have to say anything. I will answer the questions to the best of my ability.
Well,
and
let
honestly,
me ask you, an individual who says that he is going to, quote, come after, end quote, people he alleges, quote, help Joe Biden rig the presidential elections, that he has a list of people who are part of this deep state who should be prosecuted, that he's going to close down the FBI building on his first day in office. Is that a person who appropriately should be the FBI director? Aren't those comments inappropriate? Shouldn't you disavow them and ask him to recant them?
Senator, I am not familiar with all those comments. I have not discussed those comments with Mr. Patel. What I do know
Well,
is
I'm
Mr.
asking
Patel,
you for your view.
Excuse me. What I do know is Mr. Patel was a career prosecutor. He was a career public defender, defending people. And he also has great experience within the intelligence community. What I can sit here and tell you is Mr. Patel, if he works with running the FBI, if he is confirmed, and if I am confirmed, he will follow the law if I am the Attorney General of the United States of America, and I don't believe he would do anything otherwise.
Well, let me just submit that the response that I would have hoped to hear from you is that those comments are inappropriate and that you will ask him to disavow or recant them when he comes before this committee, because they are indeed chilling to fair enforcement and the rule of law. Let me ask you on another topic. When we met, I welcomed your support for the goals of the Kids Online Safety Act. And Senator Blackburn and I have spent a lot of time, devoted a lot of effort to the passage of the Kids Online Safety Act, which happened by an overwhelming vote of 91-3, 72 co-sponsors, including Vice President-elect Vance. I appreciated our discussion and your support for protecting kids online when we met last week. I'm hopeful that this area is one where we can work together. Can we count on your support in working together to protect kids online?
Senator, absolutely, and thank you for that legislation, and Senator Blackburn. I believe in this world right now, we have to find the things we have in common, and that is certainly one of them, Senator, protecting our children from online predators. You've done so much on that front, and I thank you. I attempted to do that as well when I was Attorney General, but I am committed to working with you on anything we can do to protect our children throughout this country. When I was Attorney General, we started something called From Instant Message to Instant Nightmare, and educating parents about online predators. And that also, Senator, is one of the core functions of the FBI, the cyber unit. They sit there, these agents sit there all day long and investigate child predators. We tell parents constantly, you think
Ms.
you're talking
Bondi,
to another
I
child,
apologize.
and you're not.
I'm going to interrupt you. I welcome
Sure.
your positive response. I have
Oh,
one
go ahead.
more question that I'm going to try to fit into
Sure.
this round. TikTok will be banned unless it is sold because it has become a tool for the Chinese to collect information and do surveillance and endanger our national security. Can you commit that you will enforce that law promptly and effectively? And I ask this question because President Trump's pick for your Solicitor General in the Department of Justice went to the United States Supreme Court arguing that the ban should be delayed. Will you commit to enforce that law on your first day when you are if you are confirmed?
Senator, as I discussed with you during our meeting, that is pending litigation within the Department of Justice.
Well, it's pending litigation, but will you enforce that law?
I can't discuss pending litigation, but I will talk to all the career
Well, again,
prosecutors who are handling the case. Absolutely, Senator. Discuss with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tillis.
Ms. Bondi, thank you for being here. I think I told you when we met, thank you for the time we met. I was born in Florida, have a lot of friends and family, and follow Florida politics pretty closely, and you've had a very impressive career there, though I do also have to admit I'm a Gator hater, so for the Florida alum, I'm University of Tennessee. But anyway, I actually, in some of these hearings, I created a bingo card to see what some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were going to hit. I want to go back to a few of them really quickly. One was about you being a lobbyist paid for and on the payroll of Qatar. Would you mind going back and repeating what you said in case people did not hear the involvement of your law firm and precisely what you were doing for the government of Qatar?
Yes, Senator, I was very proud of that work. It was anti-human trafficking in advance of the World Cup, and human trafficking has been something that's been very important to me my entire career, especially when I was Attorney General of the state of Florida.
And you also made it clear that you had a number of practitioners within the firm working on it, so this narrative that you were getting $115,000 a month from Qatar is correct or not?
Not correct.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about, well, first off, I want to go back. You should be happy that so many comments have been directed towards Kash Patel, whose confirmation I am supporting. In fact, I'm meeting with him today, because that means they're out of stuff for you. So if it comes up again, you will once again know that you've got a great reputation and a great resume, and they are just trying to find things to put your integrity into question. You have answered the question repeatedly that that you will be loyal to the Constitution and you will live up to the oath to the Constitution and to protecting the American people. And I think Mr. Patel, when he becomes here, he'll be able to get rid of the myth in the same way that you did as a lobbyist for Qatar. He'll be able to get rid of that list of the enemies, be able to deal with the enemies list, and the marketing department for your opposition is going to have to come up with new material because that stuff is getting old. Section 702. You heard Senator Lee talk about some concerns that he has with 702. I believe it's one of the most important things that you can do early into your confirmation. You will be confirmed, and hopefully with some Democrat support. That there have been dramatic reforms to 702. I've sat through an extensive presentation to try and make sure that the abuses never occur again and that you have a throat to choke if somebody abuses the protocol that's in place. I believe that we need to codify a lot of that. As a matter of fact, when I went through it, I felt like there were so many blinding flashes of the obvious. How could this not have already been a part of the approval matrix? So can you, after you're confirmed, commit that you or a designate will come back and provide for this committee an update on all of the protocols that have changed and recommended legislation for codifying so that when we do go to reauthorization, we'll have what we need to make sure that that program stays in place?
Senator, I or a designee will review all of 702 before it terms, of course, in 2026 and come back and report to you on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. You have a great perspective with your time in the state and working with the Department of Justice. Give me an idea of things that we need to do better in terms of, and I'm talking primarily in the law enforcement role. I think many people don't understand the joint task forces, the law enforcement efforts that are going every single day in every one of our states. What an incredible job they do. So can you give me some sense of things that you would look at to say maybe we could do it better from your perspective of having been a prosecutor in Florida?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Yeah, having been a career prosecutor, I think I have a unique perspective because I was a state prosecutor, of course, prior to becoming Attorney General. So I worked on a daily basis with local law enforcement and state and federal, not daily with federal, but I worked consistently with state, local, and federal. Then when I was Attorney General, I worked with all three as well. I feel like we have to have better coordination among all our agencies, especially given all the terrorism issues that we've discussed earlier in this hearing. We have to wrap in and communicate better with our local and state law enforcement officers throughout this country. There are so many great men and women in law enforcement, and we have to, I don't know exactly how yet, but we have to figure out a better way to work together with the federal authorities.
Thank you, and I'm going to do a second round as well, but I think I also checked the bingo card for election denier. There were some people, that seemed to suggest that you were denying the election. I think that you said that President Biden is our president.
President Biden is the president of the United States of America, and President Trump will be the 47th president.
But I think you made a point that or at least I inferred from a comment that you made, a very important point. Folks, there are election improprieties in every election. The question is a matter of scale and whether or not you can prove it. We've seen it in North Carolina and seen it in other places. It's one of the reasons why I support voter ID, because we want to make elections easy to vote and hard to cheat. But the fact of the matter is people are cheating. So if anybody on this dais suggests that there aren't irregularities in every election, then they need to spend more time at home and really studying the facts. I don't think, though, that you've said that Biden is an illegitimate president. In fact, I think you said just the opposite. He is the president of the United States, and President Trump will be the next president, right?
Yes.
Okay. Last thing before the second round, January 6th. A lot of people are going to say you're going to have a rubber stamp for letting people have pardons or recommending a pardon for people who did violence to law enforcement. I'm not going to ask you a hypothetical because I want you to be consistent in not answering them. But I have to believe, as a member, I was the last member out of the Senate on January the 6th. I walked past a lot of law enforcement officers, who were injured. I find it hard to believe that the President of the United States or you would look at facts that were used to convict the violent people on January the 6th and say it was just an intemperate moment. That, I don't even expect you to respond to that, but I think it's an absurd and unfair hypothetical here, and you probably haven't heard the last of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Before I call on Senator Hirano, after her and Cruz's testimony, then we'll take a lunch break, and that break will be for 30 minutes. And I can't control when my senators come back, but I expect you to be back after 30 minutes, and I'll be here.
Yes, Chairman.
And then I may leave the meeting to open the Senate, so whoever's on our side is acting chairman during that period of time. Senator Hirano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As part of my responsibility to ensure the fitness of all nominees, I ask the following two initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
Ms. Bondi, I am focused on two things in my evaluation of President-elect Trump's nominees. The first is whether the nominee is qualified and experienced enough to do the job. The second is a fitness to serve, which includes putting loyalty to the Constitution over loyalty to the president. Unfortunately, in my view, many of President-elect Trump's nominees are lacking in at least one of these two requirements. Ms. Bondi, your experience as a prosecutor is the kind of thing we would expect to see in a nominee for Attorney General, but I do have questions and concerns about potential conflicts of interest, about whether you will keep DOJ's law enforcement responsibilities independent of the president's political whims, and about whether you will let facts and evidence guide your decisions. So let's start with the importance of facts, which you say is important. Ms. Bondi, we want an Attorney General who bases decisions on facts. So I want to ask you a factual question. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden is the President of the United States.
Ms. Bondi, you know that there is a difference between acknowledging it and, I can say that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I may not like it, but I can say it. You cannot say who won the 2020 presidential election. Okay. It's disturbing that you can't give voice to that fact. Moving on to DOJ's independence from politics. Ms. Bondi, if you are confirmed as Attorney General, you will take an oath to the Constitution and not to any individual, including the President. To start, I'd like to know whether you agree with some of the statements President-elect Trump made during the election, during the campaign. First, are the felons convicted of breaking into the Capitol on January 6th hostages or patriots, quoting Trump, as President-elect Trump has said repeatedly? Do you agree with his characterization of the felons that I referred to?
I am not familiar with that statement, Senator.
I just familiarized you with that statement. Do you agree with that statement?
I'm not familiar with it, Senator.
Okay, no answer. He has also said illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation. He said that in December 2023. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I am not familiar with that statement, but what I can tell you is I went to the border a few months ago. I went to Yuma, Arizona, and what I saw at that border was horrific, Senator. It was horrific.
Ms. Bondi,
I went to a rape crisis center.
That is
If I could
not my
finish,
question.
I went to a rape crisis center. Well, I'm not familiar with the statement, but I went to a rape crisis center. I met with Border Patrol agents. I'm sure you've been to the
Ms.
border
Bondi,
as well. So
I
you
want to
could
get to
answer
my
that.
next question. So I believe that you responded to a question from Senator Whitehouse, and let me get your response again. You said that the White House, if I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me. You said that the White House will play no role in investigative or charging decisions in the DOJ. Is that correct?
Senator, what I said is that it is the Department of Justice's decision to determine what cases will be prosecuted.
What role will the White House have in investigative or prosecutorial decisions of the DOJ?
It is the Department of Justice's decision, Senator.
So that sounds to me that you're saying that the White House will not have any kind of role. Meanwhile, though, you have an incoming president who said, I have the absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department. And in fact, President-elect Trump considers the DOJ to be his law firm. I ask you this. If President-elect Trump asks, suggests, or hints that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his perceived political enemies, would you do so?
Senator Hirono, I wish you had met with me. Had you met with me, we could have discussed many things and gotten to know.
I am listening to you now. Could you respond to the question?
Yeah, you were the only one who refused to meet with me, Senator. But what we would have discussed is that it is the job of the Attorney General to
I'm very
follow
happy to listen
the law.
to your responses under oath, Ms. Bondi. So I think it's really important to us that the Attorney General be independent of the White House. And you have a president-elect who considers the AG's office his law firm. I would like to know whether if the president suggests, hints, asks that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his perceived enemies.
Senator, I certainly have not heard the president say that. But what I will tell you is 2/3 of Americans have lost faith in the Department of Justice. And it's statements like that, I believe,
Ms.
that make
Bondi.
people continue to lose faith. If I am confirmed as Attorney General, it will be my job
Getting
to
on
not
to my
only
next
keep
question,
America
you're not
safe,
responding.
but restore integrity to that department.
Why don't we
and that's
move
what
on
I
to
plan
something
on
that
doing
you said.
every single day as Attorney General.
On August 25th, 2025, on Fox News, you said, when Republicans take back the White House, the Department of Justice, the prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones, the investigators will be investigated. Ms. Bondi, is Jack Smith one of those bad prosecutors that you will prosecute as AG?
Senator, you hesitated a bit when I said the bad ones. Every decision
Sometimes
will be
badness
made
in the eyes of the beholder. I'm just asking whether you would consider Jack Smith
Senator,
to be one of the people. How about Liz Cheney?
Senator,
How about Merrick Garland?
I am not going to answer hypotheticals. No one has been prejudged, nor will
I
anyone
am
be
asking
prejudged
whether
if I am
these
confirmed.
are the kind of people, these are in fact the people that you would prosecute. I'm not getting an
Your
answer.
time is up. Would you like to?
My time is,
Would you like to
Mr.
respond?
Chairman, she is clearly not going to answer that question, so let me get on to,
Would you like to?
I do have
I'd love to
questions for the second round.
You'll have a second round. Would you like to speak before I call on Senator Cruz?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bondi, welcome. Thank you for
Thank you.
your long career in public service, and thank you for your willingness to take on this incredibly important office. You know, I have to say, I don't know that there is a more important position in this new administration than the position to which you have been nominated, Attorney General of the United States. I thought the exchange just a moment ago with Senator Hirono was illustrative. She asked you how you would respond if the president asked you to target his political enemies. It's rather striking because it's not a hypothetical. It has happened over the last 4 years. And I think perhaps the most tragic legacy of the Biden-Harris administration has been the politicization and the weaponization of the United States Department of Justice. And we don't need to ask hypothetically because Joe Biden publicly mused and allowed the New York Times to report it, calling on Merrick Garland, why will he not prosecute Trump more quickly? And Merrick Garland, sadly, he sat in that chair and promised to be apolitical, and he broke that promise almost the instant he walked into the Department of Justice. If you look on the west pediment of the Supreme Court of the United States, just above the entrance, there's a simple yet profound four-word phrase: equal justice under law. We have seen over the last 4 years a Department of Justice that systematically targeted the political opponents of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that systematically protected his friends and allies. And it is tragic to see the loss of confidence in the American people, in the Department of Justice, and in the FBI. I would note, I don't think there's an institution in America who has lost more respect from the American people than the FBI has in the last 4 years. That is a grotesque violation of the obligation of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So I want to start with just a very simple question. If you are confirmed as Attorney General, will you pledge to fairly and faithfully uphold the law regardless of party?
So help me God.
Amen. Look, and I want to be clear for folks at home. I don't want a Republican Department of Justice. I don't want a Democrat Department of Justice. I want a Department of Justice that follows the damn law. And I think the American people do too. That shouldn't be too much to expect. Now, I'm grateful to President Trump for nominating you. I think on any objective level, you're clearly qualified for this position. You have been a prosecutor for decades. You have been the elected Attorney General of the state of Florida, the third largest state in America, for 8 years. Let me ask you, in terms of your practice, how many criminal cases over the course of your career have you personally handled?
Handled thousands.
How many of those were before a jury?
Hundreds. I don't want to overstate, but hundreds. I was in a courtroom for many years. I tried 4 when I was an intern, jury trials. I think you had to try at least 20 in misdemeanor before you went to felony. Then you were in court every day, and I was also lead trial attorney for many years trying many cases. So.
And how many of those cases would have been before a judge?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds as well, but hundreds before a jury, I would assume.
And as Attorney General of Florida, how many lawyers did you supervise roughly?
Approximately 400, Senator.
Now, I also want to clarify something. During the course of this hearing, several Democrat senators have referred to you as President Trump's, quote, personal lawyer. Now I don't believe that is an accurate characterization. As I understand it, you represented President Trump as a White House special advisor during his first impeachment trial. Is that correct?
Within Office of White House Counsel, yes, Senator.
And is working within the White House counsel's office different than representing Donald J. Trump individually as his personal lawyer?
Absolutely.
How's it different?
You're working for the government. You're working for the Office of White House Counsel. You're not representing him in his personal capacity.
And so you have not represented him in his business affairs, in his personal life, or in any of the criminal trials he has faced?
No, Senator.
And, you know, when it comes to weaponization, it's worth noting that in more than 2 centuries of our nation's history, no president had previously been indicted, no president had previously been prosecuted until the Biden-Harris White House came along. And in the last 4 years, we've seen Donald Trump indicted and prosecuted not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 separate times.
And 2 assassination attempts, Senator.
I have to say, Javert from Les Mis would be chagrined at the efforts of Democrats to do anything possible to take him down. And I believe the real target in this was not President Trump, but it was the American people, that these prosecutions were brought because partisan prosecutors were terrified that the American people would do exactly what they did in November of 2024 and vote to reelect Donald J. Trump?
By 77.3%. Million Americans, 77.3 million Americans.
Will you commit every day as Attorney General to follow the law, to follow the Constitution, to uphold the rule of law without favor and without regard to the partisan position of any criminal defendant?
Yes, Senator.
That's what we should all expect from an Attorney General. Thank you.
We'll now recess for 30-minute lunch break. That means we'll be back at 12:25. And when we resume, Senator Booker will be recognized to ask his questions.